Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk About It with Jackie and Megan. Today we are going to be talking about another Marian apparition. This time it is
Megan's
Our
favorite
Lady,
topic
yes,
ever.
Our Lady of Knock from Ireland, where Jackie actually just visited. So we'll
Yes.
be talking a little bit about the history of the story, the historical significance, and then some questions I have.
Yeah.
Um, so Jackie, I don't know, do you want to start by telling just your experience with visiting the actual shrine?
Yeah. So this is going to be very different from my Our Lady of Lourdes video. If you watched that, if you haven't, you should go back because I spent an entire week at Our Lady of Lourdes and also Our Lady of Lourdes. It's just polar opposite experiences I feel like you're gonna get going to either apparition site. Like they're just very different. They look very different. Our Lady of Lourdes is much older and much more famous for sure. And it's so crowded. There's people everywhere from any country you could ever think of. And then Our Lady of Knock, I was there for I think 3 hours altogether. It was just a stop on our trip. So it's gonna be a very different type of experience I had there. Um, we got there, it was on a Sunday, and I went to Sunday Mass, and we were late to the Sunday Mass because we got caught in traffic, like driving in Ireland, whatever. And we were only a little bit late, but they were already like pretty well through the Mass, like all the way already almost through the gospel into the homily, which I was pretty bummed about because it's Sunday Mass. And also, I'm like, oh, I want to go to Mass at this shrine. But their Masses, it was like 45, 50 minutes. And I'm not kidding, they're giving communion out to a ton of people. So I guess that's very common in Ireland. Like that's just a very Irish thing, is that their masses are very quick, compared to what you would go to in the States for the most part, because most in the States it's like it's an hour, like not usually longer, for just a typical Sunday mass. So yeah, that was different. It looks very, very different. If you've ever been, you definitely do not go to Our Lady of Knock for the beauty. Like Our Lady of Lourdes, and I have not been. I'm going this summer, this fall actually, God willing, to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. But those two are definitely the most famous apparition sites I would say visited, and they're also very beautiful. Our Lady of Knock is very modern. It's not very beautiful, I should say,
Oh
which I feel
no.
bad saying, but I'll send you some pictures, Megan, that we can put in the video, but it's not the same. And I knew that going into it. So, and it's much smaller. It's more like you feel like you're on a campus kind of thing, like a college campus. It almost feels like a really small one. Um, and yeah, the basilica is very modern. It was definitely built so it could fit like a ton of people, which is good. Because I think they have a lot less people that come and visit. It's like almost 20 million or something crazy a year that visits Our Lady of Lourdes. I'd have to look that up, but I know it's significant. It's like millions of people every year. It's about 1 million people every year that visits Our Lady of Knock, or makes a pilgrimage there. But yeah, it's like a circular basilica and the altar is in the middle, and then there's just pews everywhere on the sides. And if you want to kneel, you just have to kneel on the ground. There's not really any kneelers. So yeah, the mass, it was just very quick. Um, it's which was weird for me. I know that if you're like rad trad or something like that, you are not gonna like the masses. Because they have a lot of people like handing out communion, like extraordinary ministers, and a lot of them were women or like things that I feel like very rad trad people. They weren't just a lot of priests handing out communion, basically. That I feel like, yeah, maybe some rad trads would not like, but that's what I kept thinking. That's what really stood out to me. I was like, wow, this is a very modern, like post Vatican II type like vibe, the masses. That's all that I could think. And to be fair, I didn't really go to any big private, well, only one. Yeah, like mass at Our Lady of Lourdes. We did a lot of just private masses with the priest that brought us there. But yeah, that's what felt, I guess, different to me. And it was not nearly as crowded. It was a Sunday. And yeah, it was just not at all the same. It was not super crowded, at least the time that we were there. And I would say there were people, it was mostly from Ireland or somewhere else in Europe. It wasn't like Lourdes where there were people from literally any country you could think of. And some of that could have been that I wasn't there for very long. But also I do just think it's just not as big of a like attraction as the other apparition sites, the more famous ones. So yeah, we were there for just 3 hours. We prayed. They do have like holy water you can bring back with you. They have some gift shops. I spent a lot of time in the gift shop trying to find stuff for my grandma. um, yeah. So I don't know. There was nothing really super significant about me visiting, honestly, which I didn't expect that there would be. I just wanted to visit and pray there. Um, And I didn't get to go because we were really in a rush, but there is like a very where she originally, I guess, where it's built near where she appeared, is this very, very small, humble chapel. And when I look at pictures of it, it does kind of remind me of what you would get if you went to Our Lady of Champion in Wisconsin, which is the only like approved Marian apparition site in the United States. And that's very small and very humble. When you show up, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't, you'd think it would be a bigger thing because it's the only one in the United States. Um, but yeah, just very humble, a lot of it, I would say. So
I mean,
yeah,
I hadn't even heard of
yeah,
this until I knew you were going to
yeah,
go on this trip.
yeah,
Whereas I feel like I at least heard of some of the other ones or seen people talking about them. But yeah, I didn't even know.
yeah,
If you would have asked me, was there a Marian apparition in Ireland? I'd be like, I don't know.
yeah, yeah. And this is the only more one recognized by the Vatican, and the only one that's been approved as worthy of visiting and worthy of veneration by the local bishop, which we'll talk about more how it was approved. But yeah, I
It's
think
the
it's
only
definitely the only one in Ireland. Yeah.
the only the only one approved.
In Ireland,
Of,
yeah, like approved for veneration in
oh, in
Ireland.
Ireland. I was like,
Yes. Oh, no, 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 no. It's the only one in Ireland approved. Yes, I'm pretty
wait
sure.
a
If I'm
second.
wrong, let me know, but I don't think so because the Pope had named that one. Like this is Our Lady of Ireland is like another name for her, but that's like the place
Sure.
for, yeah, for Ireland. So, yes. I guess I can
Not
get
the
into the
only apparition
story.
approved.
No.
Yeah, why don't you go into the story? Because like I did not know any of
Yes.
this.
And also, there's a lot less information about there on this, and it's because there's less to tell. It's very different because this is an apparition in which she does not speak. She only appears once, and the whole thing lasted for 3 hours. Um, and she didn't say anything. Um, and there were no other than her being there and appearing, there was nothing else miraculous that happened. Like with Our Lady of Guadalupe, you have the miraculous tilma that is still there today, and then the image of her. And then you have like all the conversions that happened in Mexico after that. And then the big thing with Our Lady of Lourdes is obviously the stream that came up and a lot of scientifically studied cures and miracles attached to the water and that kind of thing. And um, yeah, this one, it's very different. So it happened August 21st in 1879 at the gable wall of the parish. Our Lady appeared with St. Joseph and St. John the Evangelist by her sides. And also unique to the Knock apparition was the presence of the Eucharistic Lamb in front of the cross, standing upon an altar and surrounded by angels. And the witnesses watched the apparition in the pouring rain for 2 hours, and they started reciting the rosary. And although they themselves were saturated, not a single drop of rain fell on the gable or vision. And there were 15 official witnesses to the apparition, which also is unique, um, because the other apparitions, it was usually only 1 or 3 people that could see her. So this was more people were able to see her. Um, and most of whom were from the village of Knock and surrounding areas, and they ranged in age from just 5 years old to 74 years old. And the vision lasted for approximately 3 hours before fading. Um, so yeah, there were 15 eyewitnesses, which I actually a little bit later wanted to read from one of the eyewitnesses because they documented on there's an Our Lady of Knock official site, which we can link to below that you can go and visit that has even more in depth about the history throughout the years. And then it has a statement of the 15 witnesses and what they said. And it was just, I don't know, it was cool because they all were very much saying the same exact thing, even the things they were unsure of. So yeah, that was interesting. But the historical significance of it is that the date on which Our Lady appeared 34 years earlier, on the very same day, the Great Hunger had begun, which was a horrible time in which the potato crop, which is a primary source for food for the Irish people, failed. And this is very much something that I think is well known in history, but the famine that resulted was catastrophic. Um, and her appearance was a great consolation to those who suffered through the terrible famine and extreme hardships of that in Ireland's history. Um, and that was what a lot of the witnesses said was they felt like they were approaching something like that again, and they felt like that was a sign that things were going to be okay. Um, and then also, I guess another significance was that prior to its occurrence, the Archdeacon Kavanagh, the parish priest, announced to the parishioners his plan to say 100 masses for the holy souls in purgatory. Um, and the last of these 100 masses was offered less than a week before the apparition occurred. So for the people there, that felt very significant to the people in the parish. So 10 days, something about this apparition as well, which you brought up, Megan, was that there aren't a lot of cures that are talked about coming from it or that have been studied, and that's true. It's very unlike Lourdes, where the cures that have happened there was no official commission set up to study those, and they were going to proclaim like these things occurred at Lourdes. So there's no like documented for sure like, oh yes, we know these are cures that happen, but they do talk about 10 days after the apparition, a young girl in the village had severe pain and deafness in one ear, and she went and like up to the gable, and I guess some like plant or something that was there she like scooped up and put in her ear, and it cured her deafness. And then she went to California. She migrated to California after, and then she was buried with that same, she had kept it that she'd put in her ear, and she was buried with it in California. That's what they talk about. That was at the shrine, but that had not been studied. So they don't proclaim any like miraculous cures for sure have been connected to this apparition. Which that's actually just very much a thing with Our Lady of Lourdes. That's very specific to that apparition, but I guess that is the most that we've talked about on this channel. But it's not the case with every single Marian apparition that they track those things. There's of course been a lot of reported cures people say that they've had going there, but none that are officially recorded or have been studied. I believe that around a year ago they set up something in Knock that they're going to start studying the cures there so they can officially proclaim like there is no medical explanation for this that we have as of now, which leads to believe it's very likely, this is a miraculous cure. But as of now, there's not something like that. So like there is in Lourdes.
I think my question was more not like, oh, why isn't there more cures? Because
Oh,
obviously I
right.
know that's not involved with like every Marian apparition, but just why the cures were connected to the apparition, since the apparition was
Oh,
like only 3 hours and nothing took place.
yes. Yeah.
And then all of the like reported cures are like years later. And so in my mind, are they related? Like, how can we say?
Yeah. So the one, it was 10 days later, and she went up right to where she had appeared. And that one, everyone was like, oh yeah, that's definitely connected to her. A lot of them, it's because it happens when they're visiting the shrine there. Like they're making that pilgrimage praying for healing, and then it happens when they're there. So that they're specifically praying for it. And it's something like they go and they touch, there's like, you can touch the gable wall from which right in front of she appeared, which that was cool. We did that, and pray for healing. So it's usually connected to visiting the shrine, something like that, that then they'll say it's because of that. Unlike at Lourdes, it's usually, oh, this is very much connected because I drank the water from there and I was healed. Um, yeah. So it's just not a big thing that's highlighted with this apparition of the cures. Um, for whatever reason. Maybe that will change in the future. They'll start to study and set something up that's more official. But a lot of people have certainly said that they have been cured, and you know, they could have been, God definitely cures people miraculously at times. So, um, That definitely could have been. I looked up some videos about this, and there were people telling their stories of being cured, but they were not like official videos or anything. So I don't know. The one that they do say, yeah, was the 10 days after was the girl. I was reading that there's a museum at the apparition site. You can go around and look at the different points of history. And that was something they had talked about in one of the parts of the museum. But it's not on their website, which I thought was interesting. So I don't know. Maybe they don't want to claim it too officially since it wasn't studied, in the way that the other miracles have been. So, uh, yes, but
I'm curious. So I feel like obviously we mentioned this feels like a lot different than some of the more well-known, or at least ones I'm familiar with, like Guadalupe or Lourdes or Fatima, which I do think we should do a video on Fatima because I am actually very opinionated on that one. But those involve like Mary like actively appearing to someone and then like speaking and or doing some sort of action. Whereas this, if I'm understanding right, was it just like a still image?
yeah, yeah, they were in very specific positions, which I thought that's what was interesting because when I was reading through the accounts, they all like were like, this is what the three people that appeared were doing and exactly how they were standing, and their faces were slightly turned this way or upward. So they were just in a very still image. And she, all the statues of her, she was standing with her hands like this, like looking up, praying. And yeah, that's why this one is very unique because all of the others, it's reported that she said something, she had some kind of message. She would appear more than once. And she would like give instruction sometimes too, to them. And this, it was just she appeared and was very silent. Um, which, yeah, is really interesting. I was surprised by that the first time I heard that. I've never heard of any other like that. So
So was it that they
yeah.
were physically there, or was it more of like an image? Because with the other ones, like she's interacting with like the world, like
Right.
she interacts with like the water in Lourdes, or like she'll touch people, like so she's physically quote unquote present. But is that the case for this, or is it like they were looking at a picture on the gable wall, or like a
It was
projection
as if it was
almost?
like 3D. So no, it was not
Oh,
like an
okay.
image. They were like actual people there, but just
Oh,
standing.
okay.
So they were like 3D. So it's as if you were seeing like a real human being levitating and just standing there for them. It wasn't like just an image on the gable wall. It was in front of that, the gable wall, but it was like actual figures. Um,
Hmm.
and they said that it was pouring rain, but nothing was actually touching them. As it was if like the rain was just around them and wasn't like hitting them. They weren't getting wet, but everyone else around them was. Um, so yeah, I
Interesting.
it is interesting, yeah. Um,
Could you go into maybe like the I feel like this sounds wrong, but like the poses they were in, or like their positions, or like what's the significance, or how
yes.
Catholics interpret like what's the meaning of like
Hmm.
the different elements of it, or how they were standing and such like that.
Yes. Yeah, I can. I was gonna read from one of the eyewitnesses. Um, so she said, on passing by that this is Mary McLaughlin. She was one of the eyewitnesses. She said, on passing by the chapel and at a little distance from it, I saw a wonderful number of strange figures or appearances at the gable. One like the Blessed Virgin Mary, one like Saint Joseph, another a bishop. I saw an altar. It was wondering to see there such an extraordinary group, yet I passed on and said nothing, thinking that possibly the archdeacon had been supplied with these beautiful figures from Dublin or somewhere else, and that he had said nothing about them, but had left them in the open air. I saw a white light around them. I thought that the whole thing was strange. After looking at them, I passed on the house of Mrs. Brines in the village. After reaching Widow Brines' house, I stayed there half hour at least. Um, I was gonna see. Okay, so yeah, further down. So she was passed by, didn't think it was, she didn't know. Um, I beheld on this occasion not only the three figures, but an altar further on the left of the figure of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and to the left of the bishop, and above the altar, a lamb about the size of what is 5 weeks old. Behold, the lamb appeared the cross. It was away a bit from the Lamb, while the latter stood in front from it, and not resting on the wood of the cross. Around the Lamb, a number of gold-like stars appeared in the form of a halo. This altar was placed right around the window of the gable and more to the east of the figures, all of course outside the church at Knock. Actually, I'll have to find another one because they talk about the positions in which they were standing. It's interesting though, in this one, a lot of them were unsure about who the third figure was, a few of them, and the only reason they knew that it was might be Saint John the Evangelist is because he had looked similar to a statue that they had seen in a church nearby, and a few of them said that, which I thought was funny. I'll have to look because, or I can find the picture, because Saint Joseph I know was standing next to her, and then the other Saint John the Apostle was kneeling next to her, and it looked like he was holding some kind of book. Oh, Saint John the Evangelist. I'm sorry. But let me find. I thought that one talked about the positions that they were in. This is another witness, is from Judith Campbell. And I saw a most beautiful crown on the brow or head of the Blessed Virgin. Our Lady was in the center of the group, a small height above the other two. Saint Joseph, Saint John, and the Blessed Virgin Mary, also an altar, and the likeness of a lamb on it, with a cross at the back of the lamb. I saw a most beautiful crown on the brow or head of the Blessed Virgin. Our Lady was in the center of the group, a small height above the other two. Saint Joseph to her right, and bent towards the Virgin. Saint John, as we were led to call the third figure, was to the left of the Virgin, and in his left hand he held a book. His right hand was raised with the first and second fingers closed, and the forefinger and middle finger extended as if it were teaching. The night came on, and it was very wet. There was a beautiful light shining around the figures, or likeness that we saw. I went within a foot of them. None of us spoke to them. We believed they were Saint Joseph and Saint John the Evangelist, because some years ago, statues of Saint Joseph and the Evangelist were in the chapel in Knock. All the figures were in white or in a robe of silver-like whiteness. Saint John wore a small mitre. Though it was raining, the place in which the figures appeared was quite dry. So there you can get an idea of where they were standing. And that's like the thing that was very, very much emphasized throughout, was that Saint John wore a small mitre of, so that was emphasized. I'll have to leave. It's very, very interesting to read all of their accounts, because a lot of them, they were unsure who the third person was. It always seemed like they were pretty sure it was Mary, Saint Joseph, but then Saint John the Evangelist, they're like, well, he is dressed in the way that a lot of the statues, or like things that we know about him, had those like had a mitre and was teaching or was an evangelist in some way. So that was interesting. And then the lamb was something that was really emphasized. Was obviously the lamb is the Lamb of God. And then the stars that they talk about in Revelations, like the 12 stars, that image. So there are a lot of imagery from Revelations that was emphasized that they saw. And then also what was emphasized was the gold crown that Mary was wearing, and that she was a little above the other two figures, which for Catholics, obviously we think that Mary is the Queen of Heaven. That's one of our dogmas about Mary. Or not, yeah, it's the fifth one, is that she was assumed into heaven and that she was crowned the Queen of Heaven. So those are things that would be more, I guess, yeah, specific to Catholic theology. And the reason they also thought it was John the Evangelist is he's traditionally given the author of the Gospel of John. So some people were like, oh, he's holding his gospel, or he's teaching of some sort. And it was very similar to, there were already at that church, there was two statues of them. Those were the two statues in that church previous to the apparition. So that's why they assumed it was the two of them. So that's what I guess now traditionally we believe was likely who was appearing with her. The only one though, for sure, as they were watching, that they knew that it was Mary, for sure. And then most of them, interesting in their accounts, as they were looking, they were very sure that it was Saint Joseph. And then it was the third one, it was funny listening, that they were like, I wasn't quite sure who that was, but it looked like it was likely Saint John the Evangelist. But um, yeah, I don't know. And
Because
I
that was
guess,
going to be one of my
yeah,
questions was, so obviously none of these apparitions spoke, so they
right.
did not identify themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it would just be, I guess, an educated guess as to who they are based on like imagery and
Mm-hmm.
such.
Yeah, and just with what they were doing, I guess. Besides
Okay.
Mary, who I think it was pretty like apparent to them that it was her for whatever reason. They all were like, yeah, that's the bus, that's the Virgin Mary. Um, which also makes sense because of the tradition of it's Mary that's appearing places, you know, and they're assuming it wasn't like Jesus or something because they were like bowing and looking at her and she was a little above them. So it's very likely it was two other um humans, you know, that appeared with her. So that's why they wouldn't assume, oh, it's Jesus. I mean, the lamb is who they would assume was a representation of Jesus. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess you could say like they could be wrong about who was appearing with her. That's just, and I guess honestly, I don't really think it matters. Just that something miraculous did happen, and that it's like we can very much assume it was probably those two, based on what they said. But um, the people that, you know, approved the apparition, they didn't see it themselves. So I guess that's what we just traditionally now believe. And I want to find the picture. I think we could put it up here because they made like a replica which you can pray in front of there of what it reported the figures what they were doing. So maybe that would give like a better visual image of what I said because even as I was reading it I'm like, oh, it's kind of hard to picture.
Hmm.
Um I don't think I can show it on my phone. I don't think that would work, but it
Would
would
you
give.
say it's typically important that an apparition would identify themselves by name?
Um, I don't think so.
That
That's
was
an
something I
interesting
found interesting
question.
just
That's a really interesting question.
when I was researching apparitions in general, because obviously as like a Protestant, I don't believe Mary is appearing to people. But so then it's I'm left with, well, what is actually happening? And I just know in scripture, you know, we're supposed to be very discerning of any sort of visions or revelations. So it's very obvious that the spiritual realm is deceptive. So, in my mind, it would be extremely important that if we are seeing an apparition and believing it, that that apparition is identifying themselves, that we're not just assuming or projecting who we believe it is. But would you say for Catholics it's not as important? Because most Marian apparitions do not identify themselves,
Most
at least not by name. She'll say, I'm your mother, or I'm the Immaculate Conception, but she won't say, I'm Mary.
Mary, the Mother of God. Um, yeah, I would say, yeah, it's interesting. It's coming from a Catholic perspective. I just never have, I've always thought she is identifying herself when she says those things, like, I'm your mother. And so that's what we would assume that she is the Blessed Virgin Mary. There's criteria for if something is like they have to be discerning of because it is part of it. Like the devil can portray himself as something good. And there have been Marian apparition sites in the past where it's like, okay, it's clear that something supernatural is happening. These people aren't lying, something's happening. And the local bishop has ordained, like, no, I think this is something that is not from God. Um, and it's posing as something that is. So there is the criteria of, well, nothing can be shared that is contrary to the scriptures or church teaching. And there has to be good fruit from it. Um, and I would say that it still, well, she didn't say anything, but nothing that happened would have contradicted church teaching or scripture. And also, there were, good fruits from it. Like people's devotion and their faith and their comfort from heaven was increased, and their devotion, which you can still see by the shrine being there and people coming to pray. Um, and yeah, I would say that it still meets all the criteria. The way in which it's different is they don't have anything she said to test, because the others, it was like, okay, what is she actually saying? Um, and in these, she didn't say anything. So, um, yeah, I guess it still met all of the criteria, like that it wasn't something demonic. If it was something demonic, I think bad fruits would have come from it. Um, but yeah, I don't know. And I mean, we assume that it's uh the people that looked on were confident that it was Mary, and we would say that's the only figure that we would believe that would be appearing with a crown on her head. That very much matches with our like Catholic theology. So yeah. I guess
I'm
I
just
can.
curious, like, so obviously all the onlookers were themselves Catholic, and all these apparitions are appearing to Catholics. So to me, it makes sense then as a Catholic, there's sort of the predisposition to assume it's Mary. I'm curious if any of the onlookers weren't Catholic, what their perception would be or how they would interpret it. Obviously, there's no way of knowing. I'm just curious.
Right. Yeah. It is interesting because I think there's a sense of knowing that when you see it, and I have heard stories of the Blessed Virgin Mary appearing to people and they end up converting from atheism or to Catholicism. And the way that they talk about it is they just knew who she was. It was like this sense of knowing, oh my gosh, this is the Mother of God. This is the Blessed Virgin Mary. And then they end up um, converting from atheism or from whatever and believing in God and knowing that Christianity is the religion they should convert to, because it's like, oh, clearly it's Jesus and then it's the Blessed Virgin Mary appearing to me. Um, so yeah, I really had never thought about, oh, if she hadn't appeared to non-Catholics. Um, I, as a Catholic, believe that if the Blessed Virgin Mary appears to you, that you just would know, like a sense of knowing. I think that that can be communicated to you without like, because it's such a supernatural experience and such a thing of ecstasy that you could know. And that is, yeah. And when she appeared, it was just clear to them that it was her. Um, and it very much is in line with what we believe about Mary and her being in heaven. Um, and there were images, a lot of the images, it very much went back to revelations of the images that we see, which of course there are a lot of disagreements on interpretations of who is the woman in Revelations, like what is this representing, but it like very much was very similar to what we see in Revelations, the images. So yeah, I don't know if I'm not probably not going to have a satisfactory answer to that, because if you are a Protestant, you either are very skeptical or don't think that's what's happening. So
Hmm. Yeah, I'm curious just because what sparked this question was I was listening to a podcast on something that was not Catholic Marian at all.
mm,
It was just people having like these like supernatural or like unexplained
mm.
experiences. And this
Which
one
one?
guy is, I'll have to find it.
Okay,
It
interesting.
was like a random episode. I don't typically listen to this podcast. But it was this guy talking about how he had like a woman appear to him and she didn't identify herself, but the way he described her, I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds like a Marian apparition. Like she was wearing a crown and she had like stars and she all these different things. But because he wasn't Catholic and she didn't identify herself, she just said, I am the lady. He like had all these other assumptions as to what she was. But
Mm,
then I was like, okay, but if that had happened to a Catholic and they're not required to have this apparition identify themselves, it would just be automatically assumed it's Mary and it would be
maybe,
documented
yeah.
as Marian apparition. But because it wasn't a
Well,
Catholic, it wasn't. And it could be something completely different. I'm not saying they're the same. It just sparked this sort of question in me of well, should we not require these apparitions to identify themselves? Like by
Hmm.
name? Like, wouldn't that be important that we won't get this mixed up or confused at all?
I think just her appearing to this one random person, like they don't. There's people claiming this stuff all the time, and I personally think that people experience miraculous things that happen that are never going to be documented as something because there's just not enough like study done of it or like commissioning or like officialness around it of questioning the person. But it wouldn't be just like, oh, this is documented as a Marian apparition. There'd have to be something that come like they'd have to have a better way to look at it and say, oh, are there good fruits coming from this, or is it even necessary that we say for sure this was a Marian apparition? Because yeah, I don't know, the way you said, oh, it would be just documented as something. I think these things are happening all the time, and it's not that like the Vatican or the church or the local bishop, that's who actually has to approve, oh, this is worthy of veneration, is the local bishop, actually not the Pope, which people think, oh, it has to be the Pope that claims this. It's actually the local archbishop. Um, and yeah, I would have to go through a series of studies, like hundreds of years, seeing, oh, what are the fruits that come from this? Um, does this actually in its character seem like something that came from heaven? And it would probably have to be more than just one person. Like there'd have to be a lot of things that happened around it for it to be claimed that it's a Marian apparition. Um, and then also tied into that for us is like our trust in the authority of the church and the archbishop to claim if something is or is not. Um, and we like trust, oh, it's okay to go there and venerate, and we can believe that this, likely was an apparition of Mary because it was approved. So for Catholics, that also weighs in for us. But yeah, that's an interesting question about, does she have to? Apparently for us, no. She normally does have something that she says at some point, like in
It's
some
never
way
her name,
identifying
and that's what
her.
bothers me. It's
Okay.
never her name.
Yeah.
It's a title, which to me,
Hmm.
yeah, that just bothers me.
Yeah. As a Protestant, that's not going to be satisfactory. For me, it makes sense her saying, like, I am the blessed, like, I am your mother, or I am the Immaculate Conception, because that's something that before she had appeared that had already been approved in the church, that title. So that, like, to me makes sense. And then all the miraculous cures connected to those others. I think it's very clear to me that those were Mary. Um, This one is very unique and that she didn't say anything, but to me, the way she appeared and then the fruits that came from it, um, I think it's, I'm comfortable like assuming that she did appear there. Especially when I read through all the eyewitness accounts, like just the peace that they felt, and the comfort and then the healing that came from that after and the devotion that, like, to me very much, I'm like, oh yeah, I think she appeared there. I was, I guess we could talk about like when it was actually approved by the local bishop and then the way in which that was done for this apparition, because it was a little different than the others, I feel. Um, so it happened in April of 1879, and the first commission was called in October of 1879. So that same year, as the apparition. And the local archbishop, Reverend Dr. John McHale, set up the first commission of inquiry into the claims of this apparition at Knock. And the first commission was considered competent to submit findings because the members were well informed on the nature of apparitions and their counterfeits. So that's the people that were um, at this commission were well informed on, I guess that kind of goes what you said, like they had some idea of the nature of what a true apparition would be, and then counterfeits, because we have had that where there have been things that have happened and they've said, nope, this is not an apparition, this is a counterfeit, whether they find that the people are lying completely, there's nothing miraculous that happened, or it was miraculous and it was seen as demonic. So they took dispositions from 15 visionaries 14 people who saw the apparition at close quarters, and then Patrick Walsh, who saw the apparition from a distance as a brilliant light outside the parish church. The commission convened several times for deliberations on all of the evidence. They concluded that the testimonies of all, taken as a whole, is trustworthy and satisfactory. But it was still not in 1879 officially approved. It was not officially approved until 1935, well, 1936, but the second commission was held from 1935 to 1936. The evidence was taken under oath, and at that point, 15 sessions were held between the 24th of August, 1935 and the 14th of April, 1936. The commissions examined the two surviving witnesses of the apparition living in Knock. They were Mary O'Connell, she was 86, and then Patrick Brine was 71. And Mary Brine made a sworn statement before a commissioner of oaths and canon. After the scene of the apparition, she said, I am quite clear about everything I have said. I make this statement knowing I am going before my God. And then it was officially approved as worthy of veneration in 1936. So how many years is that after? Some years, 1879. I'm not great at doing math in my head.
Yeah, I went to Bible school.
Yeah, it's kind of right. I was an English major, so don't ask me. But yeah, they don't give a ton of details on the website. So that I got all from the history, the website about yeah, I think a lot of it was just questioning over and over the people that were there and looking for like over and over again and looking for discrepancies in their statements or is it changing kind of thing. And they decided that it was true. And then they came back, it was 57 years later. And they came back around later and the statements were the same from them 57 years later, from what they had seen. And I don't really, yeah, you're not gonna be able to see this. I was gonna try to show on
I
my,
can just insert it, Jackie.
I know, but I just, I'll have to send this to you, Megan. um, sent it right now. The picture of what I saw where I was praying. I feel like you can even see from this image kind of an overall like more of the vibe or the look of this shrine
Very
versus
minimalistic.
yeah, very modern, more modern looking. It recently underwent renovations much later to help fit more people there. Just kind of updated the shrine. And so now I feel like it's much more modern, which I did notice that also they had created, it was like underground, but it was a very modern looking space as well at Our Lady of Lourdes, but it was to fit like millions of people for mass that they all could fit. And it just so happens that when you're trying to fit that many people in, that it looks more modern.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, oh, I lost my notes. Um, I would really be interested to see because I think it was about a year ago they said they were setting up a commission um to have something like they have in Lourdes to actually study these miracles that people are proving. But there's never been, I think, like that's not really what this site is known for. Um yeah, I wish I'd had more time there and more time to walk around and pray there. But it was such a short amount of time. And yeah, like I said, it was just such a different experience. I feel like than my time at Lord's.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Now, Megan, you can get an actual visual image of what I was trying to describe the figures looked like. I think that kind of describes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did look up pictures before this.
Yeah, and what's interesting is most of the statues they're made of white marble. Um, because that's how they appeared And that's how they all described, like they were these glowing white images. They didn't really have a skin color. Um, and I feel like that's also unique to this apparition. It's just the way that they're portrayed is it's always white marble. That's all the statues, all of the images. There's some that show like a kind of a skin color, but that's not really how people that the eyewitnesses describe what they looked like. It was interesting because it really was so, it was another thing that's similar in this one is that it was to very ordinary people that she appeared. It was just the villagers that were there, the farmers. And it was kind of word of mouth, like someone passed by and saw it and they said, "Oh, you should come here," and ended up being only 15 people because I think they actually had tried to go and tell more people, but others were like, "Oh, you're crazy. There's nothing there," and didn't go. Which I just think to myself, I'm like, if there actually was something there and I missed out on seeing that just because I was like, "Oh no, there's nothing there." Like that would be kind of a bummer. But yeah, this apparition, it's very interesting and there's a lot less on it than others. Like if you try to look up things online, which probably because there's a lot less that is claimed that happened. Like it was just 3 hours and she didn't say anything. So there's a lot to unpack from the other apparitions. Like what did she say? And I mean, Fatima is certainly the most fascinating of them all. That one, there's a lot going on with that apparition. Um, I don't really think about that one much or have much of a devotion to Fatima. So I should probably study that one more before we do an episode. That one, though, I think is certainly the most controversial, I think. Well,
For
actually,
good
no.
for good reason.
Our Lady of Medjugorje is now the most controversial because
Well,
that, yeah,
it's
is.
not approved though.
Mm, but that's because they said that she's still appearing. So
Mm.
that one is very controversial. Actually, sometimes I'll just bring that up in a group just to see what people say, like what happens. And then some people start fighting about if they think it's real or not.
Oh my gosh.
I know some people that have gone and they had a great experience there. So, but I don't know, man. I
Mm.
have a lot of people that are like, it's fake. It's not, people are lying. So I don't know. Don't ask me. I had a rosary in my house from there that my roommate had gone there, made of the rocks from there, hanging on my wall for a very long time. My old roommate. It was beautiful, but yeah. Did you have any other? I feel like you had some other questions, Megan, about this one.
I think we covered it all.
Oh, okay. We should have. I wonder if there's like an expert on Marian apparitions or someone that's really studied them. Have them on
That
the
I could
channel.
really drill.
A what?
That I could really drill. I have a
Yes,
lot of like questions and thoughts and feelings that I hold back
I
because
know.
I know it's such a sensitive thing and I don't want to like hurt people. Um, but yeah.
I mean, I would not think
I don't
that.
think it's fake, I'll say that much.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think if you're a Protestant and you don't believe what the Catholics believe about Mary, then you're not going to believe in Marian apparitions. Either that it's actually Mary or that it is actually from God. Um, and I guess that's where we're just gonna have to disagree because I think the fruits from them have been so beautiful and so like sanctifying and have been so good. But I understand how from a Protestant perspective you would disagree with just the like the way that we think about. I mean, a lot is wrapped up in the apparitions in our dogmas and beliefs about Mary. And we disagree on those. Like it's such a stark disagreement. Um, that your like thoughts surrounding them is going to be very different. Um, or what you see as good fruits, we would define as different.
Because the fruit is typically a greater devotion to Mary.
I see it as to Mary and to Jesus because that's my understanding of Marian theology. Um, and also like how what it's done for me as well. I think all of the Marian dogmas point to like some kind of greater truth or about devotion to Jesus. Um, but like I said, it's just like, yeah, very different views of those things. And that goes back to a lot of our differences about like Catholic versus Protestant. So yeah, yeah. So I totally get like it was to say it's not a surprise to me. I can probably already anticipate some of your thoughts around these things.
Mm-hmm.
And knock itself is a very interesting one. I personally don't have any devotion to knock. Um,
It's probably the least objectionable because it's just an image.
right. Well, she appeared, yeah, and
I'll give you
she
that.
didn't say anything, right?
There's less for me to be upset about.
Right. Yeah, she didn't come and say, I am the Immaculate Conception. Well, I don't feel like Our Lady of
Mm,
Guadalupe really said anything objectionable.
no, I would say I think the Protestant disagreement would be the fruit of it,
Right.
of a shrine and an increased Marian devotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable with Mary coming and telling people to build a shrine to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand from a Catholic's perspective that's not problematic. From a Protestant's, it's very problematic.
Well, she never said that. She said build a church in a lot of them. But of course, because she appeared, they're going to have images of her there. It'll be like dedicated to
I thought she said build a church in my
her.
name. I could be wrong.
I have to go look back. She didn't say
Yeah.
anything in this one, so that she didn't say anything in this one, and they
Silent
uh
Queen.
what'd you say?
Silent
Silent Queen. I know
Queen.
that's a joke. Silent Queen.
Knock knock, who's there? She didn't say anything.
It's funny because they do have that scripture everywhere at the shrine. Like knock and the door should be open to you. Like that scripture, which is funny because the only reason she's called Our Lady of Knock is because the town itself is called Knock. So, but I'm like, okay, I mean, that's a good scripture to be reminded of. Like, okay. I mean, I think it would have been a lost opportunity not to put it everywhere because knock, knock. It's funny
Yeah,
because every time I think about it, I do think of that scripture, like knock and the door shall
there you
be.
go.
So I'm like, okay, I guess, but really has nothing to do with the apparition because it'd be
It
different
wasn't
if
even
she
a door.
said, yeah, it'd be different if she said, I am Our Lady of Knock, I guess. But yeah, she's only called that because the town she appeared was called Knock. Um, yes. So she's also sometimes called Our Lady of Ireland because Pope John Paul II went and visited there instead of Mass and proclaimed, like he named the church there, he called it a basilica. He proclaimed it a basilica and said that she was Our Lady of Ireland. So that's another name for her, I guess. Megan, I still think that we should go to the one in Wisconsin.
Yeah, we could drive there.
How far is that from you?
Oh, like a few hours.
Okay. I think it's like 4 hours from Chicago too. It's not very far from either of
Yeah,
us.
I think it's like 2.5, 3 maybe
Okay.
on a bad day.
Yeah. Yeah. That one, I'm interested if anyone in our comments has been there. Probably not because I don't think most people live around us that watch our videos. Um, but if you have, be interested in your experience. I was there for like I think less than an hour. It's very different from any other one that I've been to. Very small and humble. You show up there and it's like, oh, this is it. I my church in Chicago is more elaborate than this. Oh,
It's
okay.
like, you should really spruce this up.
Yeah. I'm like, are we sure this is really all that it is? Okay. But yeah. Well, anyone in our comments? We have some Catholics that watch us. I feel like we have a pretty mixed audience, but if you have, I would be interested if anyone else in the comments has been to any Marian apparition site and what your experience has been. If you've been. I feel like I've been to a lot compared to most people. So
That's true.
I'm gonna add another one to my list in September. So
There you go.
definitely we'll do a video on that one because that is my like that is my apparition site. So as you can see.
Yeah.
And there's another one right there, but she's never in the videos. And then I can bully Megan about going to that one.
Hmm.
Hmm